Thank you all so much for joining us again. We're back today and we're on page 94 and we're reading the story of Job. Job doesn't seem to be a member of God's chosen family line, but he is portrayed as a man who knew the true God and worshipped him. He probably lived around the same time as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob because of the way his life is described. But certainty isn't possible. Job is tested. Job is portrayed as a wealthy man of upright character who loves God. Yet God allows Satan to destroy his flocks, his possessions, his children, and his health. Job refuses to give up on God, even though he does not understand why this is happening to him. We too must trust God when we do not understand why we face difficulties. Prologue. There once was a man named Job who lived in the land of Uz. He was blameless, a man of complete integrity. He feared God and stayed away from evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 teams of oxen, and 500 female donkeys. He also had many servants. He was, in fact, the richest person in that entire area. Job's sons would take turns preparing feasts in their homes, and they would also invite their 3 sisters to celebrate with them. When these celebrations ended, sometimes after several days, Job would purify his children. He would get up early in the morning and offer a burnt offering for each of them. For Job said to himself, "Perhaps my children have sinned and have cursed God in their hearts." This was Job's regular practice. Job's first test. One day, the members of the heavenly court came to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser, Satan, came with them. "Where have you come from?" the Lord asked Satan. Satan answered the Lord, "I have been patrolling the earth, watching everything that's going on." Then the Lord asked Satan, "Have you noticed my servant Job? He is the finest man in all the earth. He is blameless, a man of complete integrity. He fears God and stays away from evil." Satan replied to the Lord, "Yes, but Job has good reason to fear God. You have always put a wall of protection around him and his home and his property. You have made him prosper in everything he does. Look how rich he is. But reach out and take away everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." "All right, you may test him," the Lord said to Satan. "Do whatever you want with everything he possesses, but don't harm him physically." So Satan left the Lord's presence. One day, when Job's sons and daughters were feasting at the oldest brother's house, a messenger arrived at Job's home with this news. "Your oxen were plowing, with the donkeys feeding beside them, when the Sabians raided us. They stole all the animals and killed all the farmhands. I am the only one who escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another messenger arrived with this news. "The fire of God has fallen from heaven and burned up your sheep and all the shepherds. I am the only one who escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, a third messenger arrived with this news. "3 bands of Chaldean raiders have stolen your camels and killed your servants. I am the only one who escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another messenger arrived with this news. "Your sons and daughters were feasting in their oldest brother's home. Suddenly, a powerful wind swept in from the wilderness and hit the house on all sides. The house collapsed, and all your children are dead. I am the only one who escaped to tell you." Job stood up and tore his robe in grief. Then he shaved his head and fell to the ground to worship. He said, "I came naked from my mother's womb. and I will be naked when I leave. The Lord gave me what I had, and the Lord has taken it away. Praise the name of the Lord. In all of this, Job did not sin by blaming God. Job's second test. One day, the members of the heavenly court came again to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser, Satan, came with them. Where have you come from? The Lord asked Satan. Satan answered the Lord, I have been patrolling the earth, watching everything that's going on. Then the Lord asked Satan, have you noticed my servant Job? He is the finest man in all the earth. He is blameless, a man of complete integrity. He fears God and stays away from evil. And he has maintained his integrity, even though you urged me to harm him without cause. Satan replied to the Lord, skin for skin. A man will give up everything he has to save his life, but reach out and take away his health, and he will surely curse you to your face. All right, do with him as you please, the Lord said to Satan, but spare his life. So Satan left the Lord's presence, and he struck Job with terrible boils from head to foot. Job scraped his skin with a piece of broken pottery as he sat among the ashes. His wife said to him, are you still trying to maintain your integrity? Curse God and die. But Job replied, you talk like a foolish woman. Should we accept only good things from the hand of God and never anything bad? So in all this, Job said nothing wrong. Job's 3 friends share his anguish. When 3 of Job's friends heard of the tragedy he had suffered, they got together and traveled from their homes to comfort and console him. Their names were Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. When they saw Job from a distance, they scarcely recognized him. Wailing loudly, they tore their robes and threw dust into the air over their heads to show their grief. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and nights. No one said a word to Job, for they saw that his suffering was too great for words. Now we have synopses. As we read the book of Job, we have inside information that the characters of the story do not have. Job, the main character of the book, lost everything through no fault of his own. As he struggled to understand why all this was happening to him, it became clear that he was not meant to know the reasons. He would have to face life with no answers or explanations. We must experience life as Job did, one day at a time and without complete answers to all of life's questions. Will we, like Job, trust God no matter what? Or will we give in to the temptation to say that God doesn't really care? The location of the land of Uz is uncertain. We only know that Uz had plentiful pastures and crops, was located near a wilderness area, and was close enough to the Sabians and Chaldeans to be raided. Uz is also mentioned in Jeremiah 25:19-20. Some scholars believe Uz was located east of the Jordan River near Canaan, Israel, where the Jews, those to whom God first revealed himself, eventually lived. As we see calamity and suffering in the book of Job, we must remember that we live in a fallen world where good behavior is not always rewarded and bad behavior is not always punished. When we see a notorious criminal prospering or an innocent child in pain, we say, that's wrong. And it is. Sin has twisted justice and made our world unpredictable and ugly. The book of Job shows a good man suffering for no apparent reason. Sadly, our world is like that. But Job's story does not end in despair. Through Job's life, we can see that faith in God is justified even when our situations look hopeless. Faith based on rewards or prosperity is hollow. To be unshakable, faith must be built on the confidence that God's ultimate purpose will come to pass. It is not known for sure, but Job probably lived around the time of the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, before God gave his written law or appointed priests to be religious leaders. During Job's day, the father was the family's religious leader. Because there were no priests to instruct him in God's laws, Job acted as the priest and offered sacrifices to God to ask for forgiveness for sins he and his family had committed. This demonstrated that Job did not consider himself sinless. Job did this out of conviction and love for God, not just because it was his role as head of the house. Do you carry out your spiritual duties because they are expected or spontaneously from a heart of devotion? Job showed deep concern for the spiritual welfare of his children. Fearful that they might have sinned unknowingly, he offered sacrifices for them. Parents today can show the same concern by praying for their children. This means sacrificing some time each day to ask God to forgive them, to help them grow, to protect them, and to help please Him. The Bible speaks of other heavenly councils where God and the angels plan their activities on earth and where angels are required to give account of themselves. Example in 1 Kings 22:19 to 23. Because God is creator of all angels, both those who serve him and those who rebelled, he has complete power and authority over them. Satan, originally an angel of God, had become corrupt through his own pride. He has been evil since his rebellion against God. 1 John 3:8. Satan considers God his enemy. He tries to hinder God's work in people, but he is limited by God's power and can do only what he is permitted. In Luke 22:21 to 32, 1 Timothy 1:19 to 20, and 2 Timothy 2:23 to 26. Satan is our enemy because he actively looks for people to attack with temptation. In 1 Peter 5:8 to 9. And because he wants to make people hate God, he does this through lies and deception. Job, a blameless and upright man who had been greatly blessed, was a perfect target for Satan. Any person who is committed to God should expect Satan's attacks. From this conversation, we learn a great deal about Satan. 1. He is accountable to God. All angelic beings, good and evil, are compelled to present themselves before God. In Job 1:6. God knew that Satan was intent on attacking Job. 2. Satan can be at only one place at a time. His demons aid him in his work, but as a created being, he is limited. 3. Satan cannot see into our minds or foretell the future. If he could, he would have known that Job would not break under pressure. 4. Because Satan can do nothing without God's permission, God's people can overcome his attacks through God's power. 5. God puts limitation on what Satan can do. Satan's response to the Lord's question tells us that Satan is real and active on earth. Knowing this about Satan should cause us to remain close to the one who is greater than Satan, God himself. Could this conversation between God and Satan really have happened? Other Bible passages tell us that Satan does indeed have access to God. He even went into God's presence to make accusations against Joshua, the high priest, in Zechariah 3:1 to 2. Apart from this conversation, The reasons for Job's suffering become meaningless, and the book of Job loses its force. Job was a model of trust in and obedience to God. Yet God permitted Satan to attack him in an especially harsh manner. Although God loves us, believing and obeying Him do not shelter us from life's calamities. Setbacks, tragedies, and sorrows strike Christian and non Christians alike. But in our tests and trials, God expects us to express our faith to the world. How do you respond to your troubles? Do you ask God, why me? Or do you say, use me? Satan attacked Job's motives, saying that God was blameless and had integrity only because he had no reason to turn against God. Ever since he had started following God, everything had gone well for Job. Satan wanted to prove that Job worshipped God not out of love, but because God had given him so much. Satan accurately analyzed why many people trust God. They are fair weather believers, following God only when everything is going well or for what they can get. Adversity destroys this superficial faith. But adversity strengthens real faith by causing believers to dig their roots deeper into God in order to withstand the storms. How deep does your faith go? Put the roots of your faith down deep into God so that you can withstand any storm you may face. The conversation between God and Satan teaches us an important fact about God. He is fully aware of every attempt by Satan to bring suffering and difficulty upon us. While God may allow us to suffer for a reason beyond our understanding, He is never caught off guard by our troubles and is always compassionate. The Sabians were from southwest Arabia, while the Chaldeans were from the region north of the Persian Gulf. Job did not hide his overwhelming grief. He had not lost his faith in God. Instead, his emotions showed that he was human and that he loved his family. God created our emotions, and it is not sinful or inappropriate to express them as Job did. If you have experienced a deep loss, a disappointment, or a heartbreak, admit your feelings to yourself and others and grieve. Job had lost his possessions and family in the first of Satan's test, but he reacted rightly toward God by acknowledging God's sovereign authority over everything God had given him. Satan lost this first round. Job passed the test and proved that people can love God for who He is, not for what He gives. We have a table here to read on the sources of suffering. When suffering or troubles happen, do they always come from Satan? In Job's story, his series of tragedies did come from Satan, but this is not always the case. This chart shows 4 major causes of suffering. Any of these or a combination of them may create suffering. If knowing why we are suffering will teach us to avoid the cause, then the causes are worth knowing. However, it is most important to know how to respond during suffering. Okay, so we have the source, who is responsible, who is affected, and the needed response. So the first source is my sin. Who is responsible? I am. Who is affected? Myself and others. Needed response? Repentance and confession to God. Second source, others' sin. Who is responsible? Person who sinned and others who allowed the sin. Who is affected? probably many people, including those who sinned, and the needed response: active resistance to the sinful behavior while accepting the sinner. The third source: avoidable physical or natural disaster. Who is responsible? Persons who ignore the facts or refuse to take precautions. Who is affected? Most of those exposed to the cause. And the needed response: prevent them if possible. Be prepared if they can't be prevented. And the fourth source is unavoidable physical or natural disaster. Who is responsible? God or Satan? Who is affected? Most of those present. And the needed response: ongoing trust in God's faithfulness. Can Satan persuade God to change his plans? At first, God said he did not want Job harmed physically, but then he decided to allow it. Satan is unable to persuade God to go against his character. God is completely and eternally good. But God was willing to go along with Satan's plan because God knew the eventual outcome of Job's story. God cannot be fooled by Satan. Job's suffering was a test for Job, Satan, and us, not God. Skin for skin was Satan's comment concerning Job's response to the loss of his family. Satan still held his opinion that Job was faithful only because of God's blessings. Satan believed that Job was willing to accept the loss of family and property as long as his own skin was safe. Satan's next step was to inflict physical suffering upon Job to prove his original accusation. Again, Satan had to seek permission from God to inflict pain upon Job. God limits Satan, and in this case, he did not allow Satan to destroy Job. Why was Job's wife spared when the rest of the family was killed? It is possible that her very presence caused Job even more suffering through her chiding and sorrow over all they had lost. Many people think that believing in God protects them from trouble. So when calamity comes, they question God's goodness and justice. But the message of Job is that you should not give up on God because he allows you to have bad experiences. Faith in God does not guarantee personal prosperity, and lack of faith does not guarantee troubles in this life. If this was so, people would believe in God simply to get rich or avoid pain. God is capable of rescuing us from suffering, but he may also allow suffering to come for reasons we cannot understand. It is Satan's strategy to get us to doubt God at exactly this moment. Here, Job shows a perspective broader than seeking his own personal comfort. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar are not only Job's friends, they were also known for their wisdom. But in the end, their wisdom was shown to be narrow minded and incomplete. Upon learning of Job's difficulties, three of his friends came to sympathize with him and comfort him. Later, we learned that their words of comfort were not helpful, but at least they came. While God rebuked them for what they had said, in Job 42:7, he did not rebuke them for making the effort to come to their friend in need. Unfortunately, they did a poor job of comforting Job because they were proud of their own advice and insensitive to Job's needs. When someone is in need, go to that person, but be sensitive about how you give comfort. Why did the friends arrive and then just sit quietly? According to Jewish tradition, people who come to comfort someone in mourning should not speak until the mourner speaks. Often, the best response to another person's suffering is silence. Job's friends realized that his pain was too deep to be healed with mere words. So so they said nothing. If only they had continued to sit quietly. Often we feel we must say something spiritual and insightful to a hurting friend. Perhaps what a friend needs most is just our presence, showing that we care. Pat answers and trite quotations say much less than empathetic silence and loving companionship. That was the readings of the morning. Thank you all so much for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you all like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment and share the video if you want to, and follow us on Twitch. Thank you all so much for joining us again. We'll see you all tomorrow.